5 to 10 seconds. Alright. Let's see. Yep. Should be going now. Double check. And, alright everybody, this is, Education by Ed, and he's got an interesting and informative subject today. Hopefully it won't be too taxing on you. Ed, go ahead and take it.
Thank you. Well, eventually we're going to start getting introduction structure again. We haven't done that in a while. And then the other thing, we're going to start changing the Monday night to Saturday night, seeing that another 3 people this last week decided to change their structure to, what do they call that? They decided to change their structure to Monday night again. Had 50 people in the last year change their talk shows to Monday night. They used to be on a Sunday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and a Saturday. Of course, I always find that interesting. You know, I mean, you know, it just shows you how you're getting the points out because they don't want to do it. And I got another guy, Brian. It's interesting because he brings out some interesting stuff himself, but he's a Canadian, a Canuck. Remember, Canada is not in any shape, form part of the United States. It's still owned and represented and controlled by the Vatican and the Queen of England. So when you get these people from Canada and all these structures that are getting into this country going, well, I have a right. No, immigration has no rights whatsoever. Let's clarify that. They have no rights even to land, to own land, to buy land, to pay taxes. Well, they have an obligation to pay taxes on land because that's part of the immigration process when you read the immigration law as well as the tax law. And that's the one thing that people don't read the stuff. The tax law also, too, says elected public servants, registered voters, and registered church members are mandatory to pay taxes. Public service mandatory, and then by that because of the facto dollar that was put in called the Federal Reserve Debt Note, Executive Order 2040, March 9th, 1933. So it's going through real history of what it's implied, how it's implied, and knowing your standing when you go to court. Because when you go to court, including tax court, to know if you're a lawful bloodline American or a citizen. I know some people out there still go after me on their talk shows going, I don't know why Johnston talks about the lawful bloodline American structure. And it's like your mother and your daddy, when they mated, they had you. What happens when you get cut? You bleed blood. So that's blood. That's a bloodline. So when your bloodline goes back in this country more than 100 years, and now it supersedes the, the brain fart, Ellis Island, because when I opened Ellis Island in 1912 and we're 2017, so now it's 102 years, 5 years, 105 years over that when it opened. So 100 years is 5 generations because they figured every child back then or every woman had a child by the age of 20. So that was considered a generation to have the first bloodline child. And bloodline is actually in the Constitution. It is actually in the structure of the House and Senate. I've put these in my instruments. Now you have people that want to try to argue with me, and they've tried to argue with me even when I send them instruments, and then they want to argue, and it's like, did you read the instrument? Well, no. Until you read the instrument, don't sit there and try to bring a point to me if you don't know what the hell you're talking about. To me, it's very frustrating when people do that. And I don't play devil advocate crap psychological wham-wham games. We don't have time for that in life. We have time for people to start amending their structure, filing their structure, either knowing if they're lawful in the structure to get out of the damn democracy system of the Vatican, the religious structure, or if they're an immigrant setting up their assets so when their children become 5th generation, they're off the system. And so that's the point that I'm working on right now. I'm getting ready to file on my county tax assessor. I'm working on that. First, I got to get the new filing that I just did on Cape Brown. I've got to cut and paste that, and I'll have that filed here. This next 4 days, I'm filing on the House and Senate because the House and Senate's supposed to open up here in a week. So when the warning bell goes off on the House and Senate, I want to have that. I'm going to be filing in the House and Senate that I'll be putting up on my Facebook sites. And if you're not a member of the United States for America Republic elected, United States for America Republic elected and public servants oversights, join it. Because when I put these things up, you're going to want to go to your senator, your congressman, your public servant, not your representative. I don't play British games. They don't represent me. They're my servant. And if they don't like that, they can take their butt and go back to England. I don't care if they're born here. I don't care if they're a seventh generation American. You're going to play that British game, you go back to England. I don't care if you came from Scotland or any other country. You go back to England. You want to play the British game? Go back. Oh, that's right. Scotland is part of England. But anyhow, so I'll be getting that written up. And then we have the United States, I said that, the Civil War, 1866 lawful bloodline American site. Then I have New Organ Trackers site. And then I also, too, I have Recall Kate Brown site. And we are doing that. I got to figure out how my original structure disappeared on the indictment charges that I had on Kate Brown on that site. Somehow, a friend of mine's information got posted on that instead of the structure on it. So I have to go back for 4 or 5 hours to go find that and all my work again. Because I want to get the criminal charges put up there back on that site. Because I don't want anything but the criminal sites and the criminal prosecution of Kate Brown on that site. Because if we, the people, don't stand up, there is no point for the rest of the world. Because we, the United States of America, of course, I think the original structure said for America, and then the House and Senate changed it to of. And that's the one point that people need to comprehend, how things have been shifted around. And all of that came back to the structure when we were still arguing with the British government, the public servants. And that's the one thing that people need to realize. It's the British government, not we the people. There is 2 governments in this country, 2 contracts in this country. One is the Vatican contract, and actually, technically that goes back to the 1213 contract, and that's part of the Magna Carta of 1215. But Magna Carta technically is England, not Constitution law. So that is the one point that we have to look on the structure of what's going on in our elected and public servant structure. All right, we have public servants. So when it comes to taxation, excuse me, they have to pay it. Now, when they started forcing this so-called democracy crap down our throats after World War II. This happened after World War II. And I remember even arguing in 1990 in Lincoln County for people to pay property tax outside the city limits and outside the rural areas. And that's the one thing that people didn't pay property taxes. And I know people who didn't, and then they were forced at gunpoint primarily to do it. And that's the one thing, when you're forced to pay property taxes at gunpoint, that's threatening your life. That's racketeering, fraud, and extortion. So I am writing that up, and I will be serving that on my county commissioners. I will be serving that on the Oregon State House and Senate Legislative Council. I'm going to try to set up for a day at the Capitol so that way we could have a public hearing on this so the evidence gets put in place. That's the one thing that we need to do so that way we have it set up that our public servants know their position. The Oregon State House and Senators are a member of the British government. They are not American government. They have a contract of that structure. And I have that in my police structure that I'll be getting out and the filing I'm doing on Kate Brown here this week. Because I have re-altered the original instrument that I put out. And I really did alter that. I had to put in the state constitutions because each state has a treaty and a constitution with the British government. You have to realize that's the Vatican, that's your religion structure, your churches. The Vatican runs and controls every religion. And the one thing is very sad about that. I don't like getting into religion conversation on the show. I have a link on new.org and trackers on my website that I had a friend of mine that we've been discussing this back and forth, and we've had some extreme heated arguments on religion, and so I got a website on the website. We got a link for that, so I'll set up a lot of that. He brought some new information to my attention, and which I don't have a problem. But like I said, this stuff came from a foreign country. Okay, that's the whole point. It came from a foreign country. They brought their Bibles to this country, raped, robbed, and murdered our people. We didn't have a Bible in this country. It was forced to shove down our throat if we didn't do this. And the Native Indians, they were shoved down their throat. And if they didn't read the Bible, they were killed. If they didn't comply and get their hair cut and start taking Christian names, they were killed. Everybody says, I'm a Christian. Oh, and I tell people, you're a Christian, huh? So you endorse rape, robbing, and murdering, and you believe raping children is acceptable. Oh, no, it's not. Bullshit. Christians sit there and buy for it. They invest in it. You have the county courthouse that invests in it. You have what they call children's laws now that only existed in the last 20 years. Children court that never existed until the last 20 years. The parents are responsible for their children, and the British government, the Vatican, comes out and states that the state owns your child. It's their property. And that's property tax, too, because your children are taxable. You file an income tax on them. So when you file income tax and you use their names in their filing of income tax, you're giving your child over the state income. Because remember, the IRS is not a government agency. It's actually a subsidiary of the British government in Washington, D.C., out of England from the Vatican. Has nothing to do with the United States of America. IRS is not part of America. IRS originally was left here. Taxable income was left here by King George when he went back to England. And that's the one thing that people have to realize. This is England crap. Even some of it's Spaniards, Spain information. That's from a foreign country that invaded this country. And people go, I'm a Muslim, I'm a this, or I'm a Muslims is the worst of them all. Muslims have been 100% banned from the United States in 1821. Permanently banned. Because of the bloodiest war in history. Type it up. That's why Marines are called Marines, and the Navy was formed by Thomas Jefferson. That's the one point that people need to go in real history. They've been so brainwashed by the liberal teachers of democracy because they get a paid income check from it. And if you go to Title IV of the federal government, they're paying the teachers out of Social Security to rape, rob, and steal the children. It's true. They get paid to do that. The attorneys and judges get paid out of the fund that Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton created to rape children and collect the money. That's what democracy is all about. Democracy says I can rape your children. I can do anything I want to your children. That's real democracy. And it's a shame that people don't tell the truth on real democracy. Most of the people know democracy doesn't give you rights. It gives you the authority to steal your property, your land, and that's the one thing that your children are your property. It's your bloodline. So I'm going to get into property taxes here in a minute. I got to pull up some stuff. I just got back online, fighting the computer again. But I want to bring this stuff up so this way you start comprehending these things of what's really going on compared to what the people are alleging going on. And that is the one thing that people have to come to the common conclusion of what the truth is in the 48 states. Remember, we are not 50 or 51 states. We are 48. 48 is after the Civil War, that there's only 48 states. The rest of it don't exist, period. It's not true. It doesn't exist. So when people start standing up and they go, I have rights, and it's like, okay, so what are your rights in? Do you know what a right is? Do you have a right because you know what a right is? See, that's the point that most people have to comprehend, knowing what a right is, knowing what hearsay is. Because once you know what hearsay is, and you admit to hearsay, then you have a standing. Because you know that you have a right because you're not going to comply with hearsay. And that is one of the major points of view that you have to start standing up on the structure. Because if you don't start standing up on this structure, nobody else is going to defend you, because the damn people of these court system rape, rob, and pillage for money. And these guys know it. A cop says, well, I was never trained in that. Oh, what bullshit. They're trained in it. They know what they get by public safety instructions. But remember, a cop is not there to protect you as a Supreme Court. Attorney and judges are to lie to you for income for the British government, for their corporation. Supreme Court has already stated that they have a right to lie for their own personal financial gain. So dealing with your property taxes, this is the one thing, knowing what your property taxes are, knowing what your liability is. And see, that's the one point that people do not comprehend, who don't realize if we start uniting and standing together and properly educating people for their rights, not privileges now, for rights. And once you start understanding your right, and that means lawful bloodline American or legal citizen. Now, there are people out there who goes, oh, Johnston doesn't know what he's talking about. There's no such thing as a lawful bloodline American. Well, and I hate to tell it, but Isaac is a third-generation immigrant. So when these guys are out there telling you stuff like this, they're immigrants. They're trying to sit there and cover their own personal greed, their own personal structure. Like some of these people, their families in the court system that's been in the court system that founded in the United States of America. That's the one thing that you have to realize. And then, like I said, and you go back, that's the 1952 Immigration Act as well that says Muslims are not allowed because of their religion. Their religion says that I could rape, rob, and pillage and murder women. I could rape the children. I could screw goats or whatever else. And, there's a bunch of Muslim kids who did that. And they ended up with rabies. True story. Not fiction. This is real stuff that goes on. So that's the point, that we don't want to sit there with these problems that are going on. That are, we have to clarify our comprehension of these things and make sure that the children are properly educated. And that's the one thing that most people are sitting there with a 501c3, a 501c4, 6, whatever you want to call it. That's a write-off, see? And that's the one thing that once you're in the system and you play that tax system, and you give your rights and authority over to the British government. Period. End of story. I've helped many people with their cases and stuff. Oh, I'll help you out. There's been a few that have, and I'm blessed and grateful for that. But there's a lot that I tell them, if you want to do that, help, pay my water, electricity bill or something like that. And, people just take advantage. And then they call you back after they win their case because they got in trouble again. Well, sometimes you get to the point where, we don't mind helping people out. But you do get to a point where you get thoroughly frustrated and angry when people are taking advantage of you. And that's true, because people do take advantage of one another for personal and financial gain. And it is sad that it gets that way. And there's there's many groups that are out there who do property taxes. And I've talked to a lot of these men and women out there who are in these groups that do property taxes. I ask them, are they off the system 100%? And most of them have told me, no, we're not off the system. We're just still playing a game, but we got this and we have the knowledge. Well, I got the knowledge too. But I want to get off the system of the property taxes. Now, I just got through having an interview, a conversation with a gentleman 3 days ago. I got some of the information. I got to research. He hasn't paid property taxes on his land in 10 years. He's still on his land. He's filed interesting paperwork that I want to go over, because if it's what I think it is, I can see what he did. But see, I want to be able to put that in the way he did it, and I want to take that to the Superior Court, file a court case in the Superior Court. Once you got the court admitting that it's voluntary, then that works for everybody. But when the public servants do this, I have a friend of mine that just died 6 months ago. He hasn't paid property tax on his property, 20-something years. And then when I went by, the county was waiting to claim his land when he died. He never paid. He separated himself, so the county was actually waiting for him to die to claim the land through tax evasion, as they call it. So that's why I'm working to set this up so we can start filing these cases now. I don't do class action lawsuits. I do not recommend class action lawsuits. Because once you do a class action lawsuit, and the case is thrown out, technically you can never bring that particular case back into court. And that's where people don't get that point. You can't bring that in. They already decided it, done deal, gone. But if you have 100 people filing the same lawsuit, they throw 70 of them out, and they take in 30, and you get a victory on a couple of them, just a couple of them. You get victory on a couple of them. Now they have to go through that, and then the other 30 or 70 or whatever cases have to be re-brought in. It's called reintroducing evidence. And that's the one thing that people need to know, how the court system works. I know people that says, oh, you need to read all this structure that how the courts do. You need to go by administrative rules of the court. No. You need to know the administrative rules, and people say, oh, well, there's a time limit on everything. Technically, there's not a time limit on nothing, so long as that you're lawful bloodline American. The only one that has time limits are elected in public service, registered church member, registered voters. Because they're registered in the British government. Now, your court systems are Vatican court systems. They're not American courts at all. They're not. They are not American courts. As soon as you start figuring out that they're not American courts, and then when you go in, you're there at special appearance. I always love it when they say, do you know the charges against you? Charges, where's the injured party? Produce the corpus delicti. And that is 18 U.S.C. 3771. Produce the delicti, corpus delicti. That's the injured man or woman. Produce them. They have to produce an affidavit from the witness. And the witness has to be the injured party, unless the witness is acting for the injured party because them are signing their rights over, or they're basically mentally challenged. And that's the one thing that people say, oh, an attorney's supposed to do this. No, attorney does not have to do this stuff. Attorneys and lawyers, and I got people argue with me, a lawyer is not an attorney. There's totally two separate animals here. Well, in my research in Black Law Dictionary, it actually says in Bouvier Dictionary, a lawyer is a liar. It says it right in the Black Law Dictionary. So I go by that. I don't go by what people want to say. I go by what it actually says in that. And the other point that I was talking to a couple people earlier today, people go, well, I do common law citizen. I'm a common law. Well, let me explain. A citizen is a British subject. A national is a British subject. You're claiming you're under the authority of the British government. And if you're going to go by common law are used for the judges. That goes back to the days when Christianity, because common law was Christianity. So you give your rights over for the judge to use common law of his decision, what he's going to do for you or against you. And that's the real truth. I've been in court. I've gone through this stuff. I've had them rip me apart, and then I got smart enough and I came in and ripped them apart. I've been kidnapped and held for ransom against my will because the judge says, well, you didn't sign the release paperwork the way I want you to sign it. Huh? What do you mean the way you want to sign it? I don't have to sign anything the way you want to sign it. Well, you didn't sign it the way I want it, so now I'm going to put you back in jail. And I've been through that. I went through that 3 times. I went through that where the bailiff looks at me and goes, Ed, do you want to sign this paperwork? And, the sheriff deputy, and he looks at me and he goes, you don't have to. And I said, yeah, seeing that you're one that knows this, I don't want to sign it. And he goes, release him. And then I go back to court, and the judge says, you didn't sign the paperwork the way I want you to sign it. Arrest that man. And I keep telling him, you can't keep arresting me. That's kidnapping and holding me for ransom. I mean, I actually brought my birth certificate in court to turn in, and the judge okay, and the district attorney of Lincoln County brought it in with me. They said, I guess you want my birth certificate so that way you can claim my assets. Do you want me to sign it over to you? And they're going, you get out of this building. Why would you bring your birth certificate into court in this building? Well, that's what you want, isn't it? You want my birth certificate. You don't want me. You want the bond and the insurance fund on it. So they got me run out of the building as quick as possible. So it's one of those things that makes you, when you step out of the movie, watch the production of on how things go. And that's the thing that you have to realize when it comes down to property taxes. Because your children are your property and you get taxed on them. You end up putting them on tax credit. And then when you do a property tax credit on them, they sit there and put it on their Social Security numbers to bill them for giving you the money today. Of course they're not going to tell you that. I mean, this is the sneaky stuff that they do. They do that for a reason. Because they can, because people are gullible. They know it. They know we're not educated in the structure. They know that they have dumbed us down so far that they're winning on this one. And they know it. And that's the point that gets to me with people. They don't say what's going on. They don't stand up for their rights. They don't stand together because it's supposed to be we the people. But where's we the people? I mean, I've been fighting this stuff for 30 years. I've been putting stuff out where they've come after me on this structure. You know, and this is the one thing that's like property taxes. I've even got the structure on property taxes is voluntary. And if you look at a W-4 form, when you go into a property employee, it says tax exempt on the box. It has a box that says exempt from taxes. Sign it. And then when you sign your property taxes, when you sign for your income taxes on the job, you put voluntary on it. You put that you don't comply. So you have to know the words that you're putting this stuff on the stuff to know what is real and what is not. But you have to know it. And like I said, we do have the laws and administrative rules up on new.org and trackers. There's no charge to this site. I am disabled. I pay for out of this site out of my own disability. Yes, there's times where I have to really scrape and figure out what, eat. And because they've gone after me on traveling, it's been difficult getting out in the woods because that's how I used to eat. Go get in the woods and I could get my food. I hunt and fish without a license. Been doing that for shit since I started fishing when I was 13 years old in California. California law even says that you don't need a hunting and fishing license. Fishing on the beach, the docks, anywhere on the California coast. Don't need it. And then Jerry Brown got in office. Of course, Jerry Brown has changed everything to rape, rob, and pillage the kids, the people in that country. And yeah, I used to thought when I grew up Jerry Brown was something special, and then I realized afterwards that he wasn't, just like Pelosi and all them, Boxer. They rape, rob, and steal. They know exactly what they're doing. They lie. I mean, even Feinstein's daughter is in hot water right now again, and they lie. And then these people will tell you, oh, I go to church, I'm religious, I do this. They lie. They ain't religious. They go to church to make it look good because those people who are religious believe in this crap. Oh, she goes to church, she's doing the right thing, so, we got to forgive her for her sins. What a moron statement that is. Her sins, well, she has to live with her sins. Some of the sins that she's been involved with, including covering up for popes and ministers in California raping children, she should go to prison along with them. She knows it. It's a fact. So that's the point that it comes down to your property taxes, your income taxes, all taxes are voluntary. And that's the one point that I want to make sure you got. Now, I'm going to be posting my line number page here shortly, dealing with what I got filed with former Governor John Kitzhaber of Oregon. I filed on him. I filed on my structure of my property taxes with the county and all that stuff. Done all this stuff. Been there, done it. And so they go after me because they know people have been listening to me on the rights to travel, a lot of other stuff. They're filing their paperwork. And that's what I keep telling people. We've got to start standing together. It's not about you. It's about we, the people. You got people that come from other countries that go, oh, I have a right to drive without a license. I have the right not to do this or pay this or do that and be involved. Sorry, folks. Yes, you do. Because you're not an American. People go, I was born in the United States on this soil of whatever state. And it's like, no, you are a citizen still because you have not, and that's a federal law too. States it. So I'll go on and read the federal law here in a minute. I'm trying to find a couple things I'm trying to find this guy's website that on property tax he has up. I personally talked to him many times, and they don't. He quotes all this stuff, but he has never won a case. And like I said, this last gentleman I was talking to, he's won. He doesn't pay taxes, and so that's what I'm working with him to get further information, so that way we know what's going on. And income tax, the 16th Amendment has never ever been ratified. They lie because they know you're gullible to pay it. And that's the one thing. They know that people are gullible. They know they believe in their book called the Bible. It's religious control. And that's what it really is when it comes down to it. It's religious control. People believe in this stuff. You know, I mean, I've got one gentleman that we and him have been on some heated arguments on the Bible. And I don't have an issue with it, but the thing that gets to me, that shit came from a foreign country. They go to hell. They brought that Bible from England, and then what the hell are we having anything to do with Islam, Muslim country? I'm Jewish. All right, you're Jewish. Go back to your country. You're not welcome here. You know, this is America. This is the land of the free and the brave. This ain't a land of somebody that's asking permission to live. And that's the point that people have got to start coming together and realizing this point about the privilege to live. Either you have a right to be in this country or you don't. And if you're here privilegedly, that means you need to stand up, know the Constitution, especially Article 3, Section 3, Clause 1 of the Constitution. Treason. When these public servants commit their crimes, when they write you tickets and do this stuff, filing treason on them. They don't want you to know the other point, too. When they write you a ticket, you're supposed to take that to the Treasury and ask for the money. You know? That's the one thing that you have to realize, that this is where these people go through and do this stuff. That is the main point. They go through this and they want you to sit there and be a slave to them. And that's the saddest part we live about the circumstances of life. Now, I know for a fact property taxes are voluntary if you comply. When you give into them, then you say that you don't have a right. And that's what I'm going to be doing here is getting this stuff done up, written up, and set up for property taxes. So this way we have a structure on it, so that way people know the circumstances of lawful and legal. And that is the main point, that we've got to sit there and stand together on these points and file the cases. I'm going to be sending a gentleman some information on the rights to travel. I'm looking for that one. I'm going to put it on my sites here in a few minutes. I will email him the structure. I got to put together the other parts that I just redid on my whole court structure. I will be getting that to him, so, you know, and then we'll get some information out on this. But like I said, you need to know your standing. And if you don't know if you're lawful or legal, when you go into court, you admit to nothing. The judge says, do you understand these charges against you? Well, to have a charge against you, there has to be an injured man or woman or child. A traffic violation, a property violation on your land is not a criminal charge. It's not a crime. You ask them to prove the crime that you have committed. You ask them where the corpus delicti. You want to see the corpus delicti. You want to see the injured party yourself. Where is the man or woman that I caused harm to? And that's the one thing you want to address when you go into court. 2, where's the injured party? You bring it up to the judge. You know, are you admitting that you did this crime? I'm not admitting to nothing. I can't admit because I don't know what you're talking about. You're talking about a charge that this is dealing with property taxes as well. You know, you're quoting me a charge I have no knowledge of. And people sit there and go, well, what do you mean you have no knowledge? You're supposed to know the traffic codes. And you go, no, traffic codes are not for me. Traffic codes are for elected and public employees and servants. What does the law says it affects me? I'm not a part of your corporation. I'm not a man of your structure that asks permission. And that's the one thing that we've got to get. It's like, you know, insurance on your land. You know, I've got signs posted on my land. You trespass at your own risk. I'm not insuring you. And not only that, the state already has a state insurance fund that they're already liable to cover you. When you pay a registration fee on your vehicle, you already have it covered. You can type in Ed Johnston and Senator Roebland on the internet and watch what I talk to them about proving insurance for traveling because it's already prepaid. And what is his response to me? Is they spent the money. It's like dealing with property taxes. Oh, we spent the money. Well, who gives you the authority to spend it on something that it wasn't designed for? Oh, but that's called democracy. We're allowed democracy. No, we're not. You're not allowed democracy in the United States because the United States is a republic. That's what even says it in the government that we're a republic. We're not a democracy. So when people sit there and try to get you convinced to go along with property taxes, income taxes, and all these other crazy stuff, ask them to prove it in writing. And then when they bring out a code and administration fee, you ask them, well, isn't that a code or administration? And then they'll sit there and go, well, I don't know what you're talking about. And then you go back to them, well, I don't know what you're talking about if you don't know what you're talking about. So in other words, you're not telling me the truth. And they'll get upset with you on that one. You're not telling me the truth. And yes, I am. Well, you just don't have evidence, don't you? So one thing is, when they ask you a question, always ask them a question in a tax court. I've been going after the lady Linda in my county for years on property taxes. And she keeps quoting me ORS 312. And I keep quoting to her, and I said, I've already proven I'm not a birth certificate member of your corporation. Can you prove to me otherwise? She goes, that's the law. And I said, no, that's administrative code. And it even says that you're liable. I'm not in your administrative code. So, and then we're arguing back and forth over that on property tax. So I said to her, all right, so it gives you the right to send the sheriff's deputies out and have me murdered. Well, I wouldn't call it that. And I said, what else would you call it? You just said you were going to murder me. Exactly what you said. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. And that's the one thing that people have to comprehend, the real reality with the circumstances of what goes on around us. You know, I mean, and especially with property tax. I'm trying to find it one site because there was a couple of quotes I wanted to go on. And I thought I was able to find my other one, but I didn't get it done in time because I was spending too much time on the phone this afternoon when I finally got some sleep and back and forth. And, you know, it's just life. But, you know, things like that happen. But property tax comes down to the structure that you have to know what it is. Why are you paying property taxes? I've even asked for property taxes to see where the money goes to. And that's the other thing that we need to start putting FOIA requests in. Freedom of information in and ask them where the money's going, how it's spent. I know they embezzle school money. That's the other fact they do. The one thing I do want to bring to your attention is that you have to start going through BLM to find your land patents. That is a very crucial structure, is knowing your land patent through BLM. And remember, BLM, technically, that's all they're supposed to do is land patents. They have no legal authority. And that's the one thing that you need to realize, that they have no authority. That is the point that they do this to you. They don't care. Soon as you admit that they don't care, these men and women are not your friends. I don't care if your kids go to school with them, whatever. They're going to lie to you. That's their job, to lie, to rape, rob, and murder. That's what they've been doing all their lives. I mean, really, that's what they do. That's their entire structure, is rape, rob, and murder. And then they go, well, the Bible gives me a right to do that because I know I asked for forgiveness, and so I'm supposed to be forgiven. What? See, this is the thing that is really disturbing when your public employees sit there and they do this stuff, and then you sit there and go along with this stuff. It's like Agenda 21 was put in place to steal your land rights, to enforce that so that way they could take your land for anything. Forfeitures. Under forfeiture law, they cannot take your land. This is the one thing that when your land is foreclosed on by the Elected and Public Employees Union, they have to sit there and take you to court. And if it was closed on without a grand jury indictment, a grand jury in order, then you have to sue the public employees and the corporation. And remember, I've got people who say, I don't want to sue them, I like them, they're all right. Oh, so they're stealing your land and assets, but you're saying it's okay for them to do it. And, oh, no, I just like the man or woman that's, the way they handle their business and the government. So what are you bitching about? If you like them, you want your property stolen, so you're saying it's okay for them to steal your land, is exactly what you're telling people. And that's the point that we need to start standing together on these things as basically a unit, one for all for one. If you have property right issues, if you own land, you want to do that. And if you don't own land, you want that to stand up, because if you don't stand for the landowner, even if you're renting, your rent goes up. Your insurance goes up. They know this stuff. Insurance is the biggest scam on property in existence anyways. Biggest scam, and they know that. And this is the one thing that you've got to learn about your property rights, even if you're renting. Because everybody goes, well, I'm scared because the landowner is going to do this or that, go after me. Well, hey, we know how that goes because the landowner is scared himself. But if you back up your public employee or your landowner, and he backs you up, that's how we're going to start doing it. It's called we the people, standing together. Because if we don't start standing together, there is no future. And I was looking for this segment, and I was trying to find my other one because I wanted to read some stuff on property tax, but I didn't get it up in time. Because I'm going to have to do that another time, because I'm going to actually read laws on property taxes and how it works. I do know the gentleman, and if you go to National Association of Rural Landowners, they got a good website up. I've talked to the guy many times. That's where I was asking some of the questions to him about how many people you got off the system on property rights. He goes, "Oh, we haven't done that yet. We haven't even got one." And I'm going, "Well, you're implying that on your website." See, I don't want to apply stuff. I'm not going to give out information or education that I can't back up. And when I give it out, I want you to read the research. And then when we start filing these affidavits and criminal charges, remember, you had to file criminal charges on the cop that kidnapped you and held for ransom. If you don't file criminal charges on these public employees that violate their oath, you're agreeing that they have authority over you. That's a true fact. You're saying that they are better than you, that they're more responsible than you. And that's the one thing you don't want these people to have that right to have over you. And as soon as you start realizing that, that's how we're going to do that. And that's the one thing that's going to happen. This is the one thing that I get into with people on property taxes, right-of-ways. And you have to know if you own your land or you lease your land. All right? If you're paying taxes like they're forcing me at gunpoint, if I don't pay, they're going to kill me. Been through this. I've had guns shoved at me. I've been shot at by these people. And this is the one thing that is, and property taxes technically are only classified in three classifications: residential, industry, and agricultural. Private property cannot be taxed. That's your property. That's your land. And this is what I'm working on right now with the laws, putting this together. Property tax statement. When you get a property tax statement, that's technically supposed to be what the county owes you off the interest of the property taxes that's being paid for by everybody else paying property taxes. Or like with a school, when you get a statement from the school tax, that's what the federal and state government pay into it, that the people are supposed to get the interest and dividends from. Not the school district, not the senators and congressmen. These guys know the rules. They know the regulation laws. But in the last 60 years, they have basically taught everybody you don't have the right. And then when the TV and the news media started coming out and brainwashing and controlling the general population because they knew that people didn't research, they just watched TV and became a slave. So when you're filing on your property taxes, which I'm going to have a template up here pretty soon, I got one that's 38 pages that I wrote for John Kidshopper. I'm going to try to work on putting one a little shorter, but I want you to make sure when I do it, you still claim the 38-page one I did on John Kidshopper, and you file the one on John Kidshopper like the original one I did, because once you start filing this paperwork and they start realizing that you're doing this, and then that way you can file the lien on their assets. The courts will tell you you're not allowed to file for a lien unless the court gives you authority. No. If you put an affidavit, they don't respond to it, they don't comply, and by acquisition, you have a right to file on them. The tax assessor will come out to your home and give you a guesstimate on taxes. What they think you should pay the privilege to live on your land. Like when the tax assessor, when I put my new home up, I didn't pay the income tax on it. I didn't pay any Oregon state taxes on it, building code fees or anything. I didn't pay any of that. People are going, you have to do this, you have to do that. And the city attorney went after me because I paid all my fees. I went back the next day after my house was on my land. I demanded my money back. Everybody in the city hall was going, and they're yelling through the city hall, laughing, Johnston's crazy, you don't do this. And then the city attorney the following day calls me up, very apologetic, and said, your check is waiting. Told her you don't have to pay building code fees and all that. I'm not a corporation. I'm not a government agency. I'm not no church. The churches get away with it on a 501c3, but then when you're a 501c3, you could actually write it off and send it to the IRS, and then they send you a check. It's interesting how the scam really works for democracy. Yes. Oh, okay. Let me go ahead. Why don't we open the floor, and then I'll finish reading this other point. I think I was getting quiet. But, okay. So why don't we open the floor? Right. We're not going to have people trying to take over the conversation. This is not where, it is the circumstances of taking over a conversation. We're not doing devil advocate crap. If you want to do that, go to your minister.
Q&A session has started.
Ask your about that. So if nobody raising their hand right now, just once you get in, just speak up. We don't have a problem. But when you file your affidavit, and I'm trying to get a short one done with the major one done on the the tax assessor for your county. But the one thing is, you always want to be polite to your elected and public servants. I don't give a shit if you've gone through a living hell with them for a year over things. You always want to be polite to them. You know, I mean, that's the one thing I've dealt with, not being polite to them, been through those circumstances. But then, you know, I mean, even so, when I was even polite to some of the cops, I never got pulled over and harassed. It got to the point where I was traveling a lot of times. I would have public servants just wave to me as they passed me, and I waved back. Common courtesy. They knew their job. They knew their respectful point. I knew their job, their respectful point. And that's the point, is that we shouldn't be arguing with our public servants. They should know who we are in the communities, and they shouldn't be coming after us because they're saying some code administrative rule is written the way it is, so that way they can make personal and financial income. And remember, when your public servant goes after property taxes and tells you have to pay for it at gunpoint, what they do, it's a criminal offense. Because if I sat there and walked down the street, put a gun to you, and said, if you don't give me $20, I'm going to shoot you, isn't that a crime? Robbery, theft, extortion? And that's the way people need to file this structure: robbery, theft, and extortion. And that's knowing how to do this stuff, filing it on them that direction. So you have to file it on the same direction of them as they do you. That is the one thing that people need to comprehend, that fact. They really do. You need to learn how to file on them. File it so that way it's not an argument. You don't want to get in arguments with these public servants. Never, ever do you want to get in arguments with the public servants. Because if you don't argue with them, they can't sit there and try to come up with you're belligerent or you're attacking them or going after something that's stupid. And remember, these men and women do that stuff. They know it to do it. They're trained and educated to personally do that. And that's part of their job, is to do that, because if they can get you in the court system, they are making revenue. It's like a state attorney general will tell you, hey, all these people come in and do all this stuff, that's fine. But we made $7 billion, but we had to pay out $1 billion in fine. So if you're making $7 billion to $1 billion and you got $16 billion going in the pocket, what does that tell you? You know, that's the one point that you have to sit there and know your rights. Stand up. Oh, that's interesting. Some of my sites ain't coming up now. I wanted to get in them so I could post some information to some folks. And on income tax, so you definitely know. And if you type in Exhibit 5.051, former IRS Commissioner Steve Miller says property taxes are voluntary. Remember, that is an exhibit that's already been entered in the House and Record that already admits you don't owe taxes if you're lawful. People say, well, that applies to everything. No. And taxes are based on labor, income labor. Oh, that's right. You're not supposed to pay income labor. You're supposed to pay taxes on interest and dividends of corporation taxes and structure. And that's the way it really works. Go ahead.
Yeah. Was it about 2-3 years ago, there was a gentleman, he filed because of the same thing, paying taxes and stuff. However, he took it to higher court in Texas Supreme Court, I guess, and he couldn't get any of the judges to answer his questions due to the fact that under the USC code that if they did it, they were to be hung or something like that. Anyway, so one of the judges recused himself, but I was wondering, I never heard the end of the story to that. I was wondering, did you find out anything about that?
That was still pending, and another gentleman did it in Ohio too, and they refused to respond to him. And so the one in Ohio still has never paid income tax for the last 30 years on it. So I don't know if this guy started paying income tax or not, but I know about a case in Ohio that the guy did the same filing, and he's never paid income tax on it.
And on the how are we supposed to do it? I mean, start out just letting them know that, or is there something we're supposed to file to let them know that we do not owe any property tax?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, now I read an affidavit, and there are paperwork to do that.
Okay, so start out with an affidavit, and then
yeah.
And then what's the next one we file after that?
Well, that's the one thing that I will be having that up, because I already wrote a structure on property taxes with all the laws, all the court administration structure. I've already done that pre-existence. So I will be planning on getting that to the general public out there really soon on that one, so people can see what the laws are. I'll be working on that, but first I have to get the filings out with Kate Brown on the structure on that, including in 2000 in state of Oregon, the Democratic Party decided to claim your land for the Vatican in the state of Oregon.
I hope they have their receipt for that, because I don't see how they could claim something they didn't even own in the first place.
Well, I know that's what gets to me about it. People do claim stuff they don't own. That's like with immigrants, and I say to people, well, I can walk in your house, sit down at your dinner table, and I can take over your remote, and then next thing you know, I'm running the house. And people say, well, you can't do that. And I said, well, you allow the public employees to do it. You allow the Vatican Church to do it. Why can't I do it to you? You get where I'm coming from with that one. And
yes, I comprehend.
Yeah, but see, it's getting people to start standing up and filing these affidavits collectively. Because when I get this one that's going to be filing on Kate Brown, I want to make sure that people comprehend what they're filing and know their standing when they file. Because when you file an instrument, if you don't know when you go into court what you're saying, they'll eat you alive. They'll chew you up and spit you out. They know it. And like I said, people say, and I've had people say, oh, the cops said that they weren't trained in that because the training didn't train them. Baloney. They're trained in it. They know it. But they know if they didn't write so many ticket quotas out that they do have a ticket quota, they do have a structure that is real on that. And if they didn't put so much out, they know that they weren't being unemployable. And they know that's reality. This is not a joke. They lose their job. They're unemployable. So, and that's the one thing. You don't want to sit there and do that to set yourself up in those type of circumstances. And like I said, they truly do know they're unemployable. And so they're going to lie, cheat, and steal because they know that you're not knowledgeable enough to know the difference to stand against them on that right or privilege, as some would say. So, and that's up to you to know the difference. Like I said to people when I send them instruments, after I write stuff up and I send it around to everybody. But like I make it clear, I'm not an attorney. I'm not a public servant. You know, I'm no lord. I'm nothing like that of standing. I'm not what some people say, a public figure. A public figure is taking a title of nobility. I won't do it. Because once you take a public figure title of nobility, then you're putting yourself in a structure that you're saying that you have no rights. You've given your responsibility over to the state. And people don't realize that once you give your titleability over to the state, you're saying you're not responsible. And that's why I have the other one to own your bloodline, because if you file and own your bloodline, your property. And that's the one thing, that your child is your property. And that's where you have to file and own your property. Because if you don't file and own your property, that's how the state comes in and takes your property away from you. And not only that, they do put a tax on your children. We all know that. So your property is taxable. And I brought this up before. In England, They passed administrative law in England now that you're paying to breathe air in England. It's called the carbon tax. And it's in your property tax, and you don't pay that tax to take your land because you have to pay the privilege to breathe air to live. And it's true. This is what's going on. Oregon's been trying to pass that. That's one of Kate Brown's bills, Peter Courtney's bills, and they've been trying to pass that for some time in the state of Oregon for us to pay the privilege to breathe air. They started taking public land and signing it over to like Georgia Pacific and all these timber companies because they said, oh, we're paying the property taxes. It should be our land. Well, that's the contract when you're cutting down trees. It's a contract that you're cutting down a tree that goes to the schools, and it's your responsibility to pay that tax. And then they go, well, we're paying property taxes. They're not paying property tax. These men and women lie so bad, and people get it. They're paying tax on the timber itself when they cut it. And that is the point, that when they pay the property tax on the excise tax, it's not property tax. It's knowing the structure of what a tax is, and knowing what the tax actually says. So, but yeah, if you know that guy's name, it would be interesting to follow up and get some research done on that. If you send it to me, I'll eventually get some time and schedule that in my schedule to do the research on it, because I think that needs to be done that way. Because I'm going to be doing that as soon as I get the filings done on Kate Brown. Because like I said, I revamped that, and I'll even get a copy of my revamp over to you. Because I did add to the original one I did put together, I did add in the original one, the structure of each state constitution. Because each state constitution is a contract with the British government. And that's the one thing that sort of stuns me, that people don't correlate that each state has a constitution with the British government. And if people comprehend that they have a constitution with the British government, it would work. Because if you actually do real history, you'll find out in real history the federal government is the British government. Just type in federal government. It'll come up British government. Doesn't come up American government. Washington, D.C. is owned by the Vatican, England. Your state, like New York City, people don't realize New York City is not part of the United States at all. The Vatican owns New York City. New York State has a constitution treaty contract with the British government, the Vatican. But New York City is part of the Washington, D.C., part of the actual Vatican that the Vatican actually owns. And that's the word where people need to comprehend that these things are owned. And so once you realize that the churches own this structure, I watch people that always say the churches should pay taxes. Well, I don't give a darn if the church pays taxes. I want to see them grow food, canned food. We shouldn't be going to the corporation and getting commercialized food. We should actually have the local churches growing local food and feeding the local disabled and elderly and everybody in the community. That would solve a lot of problems right there. Reduce taxes. Oh, that's right. Reduce salaries to solve a lot of problems. Because, I don't have a problem with people going out and hunting and fishing for their food. I mean, I know that Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife has gone after property owners saying that the fish that swims up the stream belongs to the state when it don't. And that's the one thing that when you buy property, you got to look at the contract, because some of the contracts on the property said, that shall do with the city, county, the state administrative and statute codes and administration dictate to me. Those are actually in contracts that they want you to sign, that you will do basically what the Vatican tells you. So when you go to court, you're going to court for, what is that? Violating regulation of a church, religious violations. And that's exactly when you go to court what you're doing, religious violations. You're not going to court because you harmed somebody, and harm means property damage or physical injury. So on property, that's the one point that, like I said, I'm trying to find it. Like I'm pulling up my internet again. I'm trying to go down my site because I had some stuff on one of my sites that I wanted to read off, and somehow the internet and Facebook is fighting me to go to my sites again. And that's the one thing I got to get those things straightened out. But yeah, like I said, as soon as I get the other one with John Kidstopper, I'll have that up on the new.org and trackers, and I'll have it up on all the other sites. Because when you get into property taxes, you want to file your rights on your property, claim your rights to your property. And even if you're a renter, you still have rights as a renter on property as well. But see, the one thing is when you do a rental contract, if you don't put in that contract that the owner is, you're representing the owner is representing you, if anybody's trying to take his property or your property, that you guys are in agreement that you represent each other to protect each other. And those are the way you got to write it in the contract. You can't go that the state right gives me a right, and because they have tenant laws and homeowner laws, you can't do that, because the tenant and homeowner laws, when you go through that process, you're going in front of a judge, he gets to decide. If you actually put that in a contract between you and the landlord, or if you're buying land, private contract, you put it in a private contract. And now you're claiming rights, not privileges. And this is the one thing that people don't see how that actually works. It's like if you buy a brand new vehicle, you want to get the manufacturer state of origin on that vehicle. You don't want it turned into DMV. And you can't get it. I've gone after mine DMV for my original one on my covered wagon, and DMV says they destroyed it. So they destroyed my manufacturer state of origin of my covered wagon, so that way they could keep me in their system. So I wrote an affidavit, served them, and I have the receipt that says that they don't have it. So and that's what I'm going by. But seeing that people are paying attention, and a lot of people have been winning their basic court cases. When they go in, they ask the judge a question. If we go in for property taxes on a court, see, they have when they do a foreclosure on your property because of so-called property taxes, they have to take you to court to foreclose on your home. Because when they do a foreclosure on property taxes, or even a bank does a foreclosure without authority from a court, that's fraud. That's federal fraud, extortion, threat of service, loss of property, extortion. Basically, they threaten you at gunpoint when they send a sheriff to your home, deputy, and the sheriff deputy has no right. The police officers have no authority. And I've got that up there in my letter on police officers when I walk you through what a police can and cannot do. And police cannot do basically anything to Americans, because police total job is to monitor elected and public servants, registered voters, church members, all immigrants, and when they violate statutes, that's who they're supposed to go after. If you're lawful and you have your paperwork filed, they're not supposed to have contact. They even got the structure in the laws where they're not even supposed to have contact to your property or your land with you on it. And so getting that up is knowing how to, when these people come around, is talking to them in a language. When you go to court, it's talking to the judge in language. He goes, do you understand these charges? You go, no, I don't understand the charges. I'm looking for an injured party. Where's the affidavit of the injured party? Your Honor, isn't it by law that they have to file an affidavit in court to prove they're an injured party? And if the judge says, well, the state is the injured party and I'm acting for the state, oh, so in other words, you're acting as an attorney from the bench as a bar attorney. Isn't that a federal crime? Can you please explain to me that circumstances of your actions? You know, they'll get upset with you, but it's asking you questions to these men and women of how it goes. You never admit to nothing when you go to court. Ever, ever. You know, they go, well, you were driving too fast. You know, you were speeding. Well, I can speed. There ain't no law that says I can't speed if there's no injured party and no property damage. And that's true. There is laws that says you don't have to do that, pay tickets on that because there's no injured party. And some of the laws that I'm trying to get on my site, that the internet or something's fighting me, that won't allow me to get on some of these my sites right now, because I like to get the information and bring out the actual codes on this stuff. I mean, you were talking statute codes and administration rules that are written that way to protect us as well. Because remember, they have to write the structure on these things to protect us as well as it protects them. That is a fact, because if they don't do that to protect both of us, then we're both liable. And remember, judges and attorneys and all public elected officials have no immunity at all. And when you file a claim on them, you file on the corporation as well as the individual man and woman. Man and women are personally liable for their actions. You're liable for your actions, so they have to be liable for their actions. That's just law. And if you don't file on that law for them to know what your structure is, that's how they get away with these things. And like I said, I'm repeating myself, and I will always repeat myself. These men and women know this stuff. I mean, I sat in the hallway at the Oregon State House and Senate for years talking to Supreme Court justices, Congress, men and women, and they know it. They honest to God know this stuff. But they don't sit there and want to tell you this because they don't want to be liable. In a sense, you can't blame them when it comes down to it because you don't want to be liable yourself. So it is a mutual understanding, and once you get the understanding, it's not going to war with them. It's just explaining the truth. And once you guys come to agreement of the truth, then that way you know. It's like everybody goes, well, I have to go to court for this, or they filed on my property taxes. Well, okay, they filed on your property taxes. Ask them when the court hearing was. Ask them to prove the court hearing date. Ask them to prove the grand jury indictment. Where's the affidavit? And that's the other point, too. I'm trying to figure this one out because there's a whole bunch of videos with people saying that, you know, once you sign for a mortgage structure, it's already paid for. The one thing is that I got one that I like. I like True Friedman. He does a lot of good videos. And that's the one thing that you have to read some of this stuff on your contracts. Because when you buy a mortgage, and this is the one thing that people don't realize, when they put in your mortgage, they actually put in your mortgage that you agree to be liable for property taxes. If you don't take that out of the mortgage structure, then you're liable. And I'm going to send this to a gentleman, too, and this is the other point. Emergency lights, when a cop turns on his siren behind you, it is a privilege. He has to have an injured man or woman that he's doing this. If he doesn't have an injured man or woman, he's liable. In other words, he's coming up to your window with a gun, extorting money at gunpoint. That's a federal crime. And there's no way to do this and filing your rights when you go into court. Because you have to know your rights when you go to court. These men and women don't care for you. And I'll say it a million times. They don't love you. They don't care for you. They want nothing to do with you. Their job is to rape, rob, and pillage you. That's Christianity. Remember, all these judges and cops and all these public servants, most of them, 70% of them, all say, I'm a Christian, I'm a member of some church. So, and that's what church members do. I wasn't brought up that way to comprehend that that's what they do to one another. So if that's what they want to do, keep me out of your system. I don't want to be part of it. And so when we're able to start standing up to one another and bringing those facts out to one another, we can solve these issues that we're being forced into. So I am emailing some structure to people as I'm talking, so this way it helps them to get some of the information so that way they can read it as we go, and this way they comprehend that what is being said, because the law is this. Because elected and public servant, a cop makes an oath to the Constitution for his paycheck. And that is, I've got to remember the title of that, Title 8, Title 5, 2331 through 2333. He makes an oath of office contract. So he makes an oath of office contract for his paycheck. That's called a de facto dollar, or make-believe money. That what we have today. That's what banknotes are. It's I owe you to pay you someday. It's not a payment today. That's like Wimpy would always say, I'll pay you Tuesday. And that's where people need to realize what Tuesday means. It means it doesn't exist. I mean, I don't have money to pay you. It doesn't mean that there is money to pay you. And that's the one thing that people's got to realize, that our government, let me rephrase that, our elected and public servants, because if you actually read the Constitution, we the people are the government. And that's the one thing that gets to me about when property taxes are voluntary, they come after us with arms. They threaten our life. And even that goes back to September 17th, 1787, where property taxes and taxes were definitely illegal. Had a lot to do with the Revolutionary War. We weren't going to pay the taxes that the 13 colonies agreed with the King of England. And that's where the 13 colonies in 1789 finally broke free of the British government. And, if you read my instruments, you'll see all that in my instruments. And that's why the King James Bible from 1710 to 1789 was actually a beheading offense if you had the King James Bible in your home. You were beheaded on the spot because it was considered the devil's Bible in England. True history. That's real true history. So it's knowing these structures of what history is compared to what we've been convinced it is. And that is the major point of knowing what history is. And I'm trying to get a couple things found because I think my site just started doing, because I don't want to sound like I'm rambling, but if anybody still wants to jump in, please do not be bashful to jump in and speak up. And that's the one thing that you want to stay to the organic Constitution. They got this one group that is trying to get people to have the states go against the federal government to disband from the contract, so that way they can put it in democracy, so that way, you don't have to, you have to go by the rights, and if you don't go by their rights of paying the taxes and administrative fees, you could be executed. That's a true statement. That's what part of the reason why FEMA camps are in place today. FEMA camps are in place so that way they can execute us. And that goes back to the structure, if you don't believe in their religion, they can kill you. And if you go back to the Christian Crusades, what we are living, and we're living in Nazi Germany in many ways today, when police officers are out there shooting people because they're not complying, that is a sickening thing that is happening. So, and then also, too, I want to bring your attention to this one, Title 18, clarifying Section 5D, October 6, 1917, the pass of the Trading with the Enemy Act. So, when you are selling land or property to a foreigner that comes to this country, and you're getting your whatever amount of money that you're selling this land to a foreign immigrant to this country, that is trading with the enemy. That actually is a federal crime. But see, these Democratic state attorney generals and district attorneys have been prosecuting people at all because they keep on word democracy, so democracy is allowed to rape, rob, and pillage this country. And that's exactly what they're doing to our soil, our land, to our assets, to our children. Because, like, you know, your child's a property that you own until it's 18. And then the other thing I do recommend that people read the Bank and Security Transaction Investments Act. See, when you start reading these Investments Act and these structures of what the banks can and cannot do, then you start realizing, oh my God, there's so much to this. And these men and women will tell you stuff because they know that they can get away with it because you won't do the research. They do physically know that they're going to get away with it because you don't do the research. And that's the one thing, you know, they're dealing with property taxes, getting this stuff done. And that's what, like I said, I am putting together an instrument for Lincoln County. I will have that published as soon as I get the darn thing done with Cape Brown. I've got to get that one filed this week. Because once we start getting those filed, and if you start filing that on Cape Brown yourself, we can stop these terrorists. Literally, we can stop these terrorists. And that's what we have to do. It's our responsibility. I talk to people all the time. Well, these people have a contract. They're not supposed to do this. They're not supposed to do that. They know it, but see, the people are not standing together to stop it. It's like I just sent out to gentlemen, I'm going to pull it up here and read this part. I want you to comprehend we're dealing with public servants. Operation of basic tool of a fire engine, an ambulance, a public servant, and it is a privilege for these men and women to travel with the circumstances. Oh, I thought it came up. I didn't do the whole thing. That's my fault. Let me just go back and pull it up through the deal because I want to bring this up to you. So this way you know, because see, your car is property. Same thing as your home. It's property. You have a right to own it, not the state. And so when you give the state permission to register your vehicle, you are giving your authority over to the state. And I do recommend for emergency vehicles reading Chapter 47, Ambulance and Operation, and Air Medical Response. That has a lot of structure in that as well. And I just sent this out. We got it up, but I was been trying to find, because I know there's actual administrative law that states with codes that they cannot, police cannot run with lights unless there's a life and death emergency. And I'm trying to find the law, but apparently I can't. I was trying to get that set up before the show so I wasn't embarrassing myself like right now. But there is laws on this that are on my website, posted up, and these are things that I do recommend you read. And knowing that if they do travel with emergency light, a cop literally can be fined without a life and death emergency. He can actually be fined for this. And actually, once upon a time, I had all that structure, but I don't know where I have placed it right now. I'm trying to see if this page has the codes. Nope. But like I said, your children is your property. Your car is your property. Your home is your property. And we get taxed on all this crazy stuff. We're even getting taxed to breathe air. And let's make it very clear. Section 4 of the Constitution says that we're supposed to have a republic union form of government. Title 18, Section 4. Misprisonment and felony wherever have known an actual commission of felony. And this is when public servants don't honor their oath of office. It is a felony. It's treason. knowing that that is the law. I've even got the structure of their oath that they take, that I have that oath up, so that way you can see that they take an oath to get a paycheck. They don't honor the oath of Constitution, and that means when they come to your home and say, well, you didn't pay property taxes, we're going to shoot you off your land. But these things you have to file on them. This is called the claim exercise of constitutional right cannot be converted into a crime. Miller versus United States, 230 F2D 486489. And this is the thing, a government or but trustees acting under a derived authority and has no power to delegate. They have no authority to delegate their authority on us. And that's Luther versus Borden, 48 U.S. 112 LED 581. Look at State versus Manual. The term citizen. Citizen is term of subject of common law of England. So this is the one thing that when you call yourself a citizen or national, you're claiming a title of nobility. Title of nobility is a criminal act. You can't do that. You can't take a title of nobility. The only way title of nobilities can be brought out is through Congress itself. And I don't want a title of nobility because that means I have to go along with their crap, their administrative rules. We don't want that. You want to stand on your own rights, not privileges. And if your privileges and you're an immigrant that's buying property, technically you're not allowed to own property in the United States. That's actual constitutional law. But if you're paying all your taxes accordingly to the instructions that you are obligated to pay, you are paying for police, county commissioner, and these people's protection of you. I know people have gone out and stated that the immigrants have more rights than we do, which they don't. They have less rights, but they're paying for protection is what they're doing. It's basically extortion fee for protection. And that is a fact. And understanding and comprehending, and I don't like using the word understanding, but understanding and comprehending that when you use administrative rules, you have to know you're standing under administrative rules. So when they go after you on property taxes, they're like filing on that. Did you get a court hearing? Did you get a grand jury indictment paper on it? You know, what is the legal title of the property? You want clarification of the legal title versus the ownership title. You want the clarification to prove who's the owner of the land, not the owner of the title. It's like a car title. The state of Oregon or whatever state you're in issues you a title. It's not an ownership. It's not the manufacturer state of origin that you have ownership of that property. A title means that you're leasing it for the privilege of having it. And that's the one thing people don't get. 41 CFR 302, and you go through that. And I do have that. Matter of fact, I should send this to this gentleman on that, because also, too, it gets in. I have 24 pages on the structure that automobiles are ownership so long as you file and claim them. And that's the thing, is that people go in and they don't realize that you have to file and own your property. That's your children. And I mean, I've took me 30 years, or well, it took me 20 years to really comprehend, figure it out, and that's why I started putting my instruments together. You know, and that's the main thing, that people realize that this does exist. And if a police officer writes you a ticket outside of their jurisdiction, that actually is a crime. People will say, well, we have no jurisdiction. Yes, I hate to tell you, you do. Read the law. You do have jurisdiction. A lot of people say, no, they don't, but the law says, yes, there is. So you have to know your administrative rules. You have to know the law and what applies to you. And without you knowing your administrative rules and what applies to you, that's what screws us all. And it does screw us all because we forget how to be responsible. Because when you're responsible for yourself, you own yourself. And like I said earlier, when you ask for a representative, you're turning your rights over for a representative, not for you to own you. So, anyhow, I don't want to get to the point where I'm starting to sound like a rambling, like was mentioned to me earlier. I've been an hour and a half on this right now. Fighting my computer, that's been an issue here the last few days. So I was trying to get things set up, and I didn't get back in time from error I had to do and trying to sleep because, sleeping does get tough when you're living on oxygen and nitroglycerin. And people don't comprehend that. Yeah, people are injured. They poisoned me. They've tried to take me out more than once. This is true. I know it. They know it. It's been publicized actually in Oregonian and the newspapers. So, and I do have the facts that even prove that they've done this stuff, besides YouTube videos and stuff that has been publicized. You know, we're threatening my life and doing different things. But people go, well, why would you still do this? Why don't you just comply and pay and shut up, Ed? And it's like, if I'm not going to sit there and bow my head, I'm not going to bow my head to any corporation, public employee, and I sure will not do it to any Bible or religious. And I can speak that way because I am an ordained minister. I do know. I've done my research. There's a couple of things that I'm being informed. Maybe I missed, so I'll have to do research on that one. So once I get that research done, then I have to deal with that one. But if I'm still standing right on my structure, then that's what deal. But when you do your affidavit, right, that you're lawful, you're right that your stuff is unalienable. You own yourself, you own your asset, you own your property. And then when they try to come after you, you want them to prove in writing that it's been to court by a grand jury in decision. Because administrative courts that they have today, when you go to these administrative courts, is a 6-man hangman jury. Same thing when you're on a boat, you go in front of the captain, who's the judge, and his top 6 men on the boat. And that's what administrative courts do, they're maritime law. And that's exactly what the structure is. And realize that the American Bar Association, founded August 21, 1871, clearly states that they are a British organization. They are a member of a former corporation. And soon as you start admitting to that and comprehending that they have no rights and knowing how to stand on those rights, then you've got standing, and that's what you want. That's the main thing that you want to know you're standing when you go to court. And people say, well, this country was founded by the Bible. It wasn't founded by the Bible. The Bible was brought in by foreigners that brought it in to protect what they believed that they came from a foreign country. And so long as that we're not going by a standard that says that we're committing this to us, you know, we're going by foreign structure, but the Constitution separates us from foreign structure that gives us rights, not privileges. And that's the one thing, if it wasn't for the power of the grand jury and Judge Scalia, we wouldn't have rights today. And that is the true fact. And it's reading the court cases on some of the stuff. I know there's a lot of reading, but I mean, I've done a lot of reading because I don't have TV. I'm not going to let TV dictate to me how to live my life. And it shouldn't be to you, because that's how they brainwash us. And literally, they do brainwash us in that thinking. And so, like I said, when you register yourself with the state, you're giving your rights to the state. When you register your property to the state, you're giving your rights to the state. When you register your children to the state, you're saying you're not responsible for your actions. And that includes your property. That's land property. Your car is your property. Your children are your property. Your personal belongings in your home are your property. And so that's the one point that you need to start realizing and standing on your property rights. Claiming this is my property, this is a right. And that way when they start using your social security number or stealing your property and doing it for something else than what's lawful, not legal, that's the thing that people need to really comprehend, the separation of lawful and legal. And as soon as people can separate the difference from lawful and legal, that's going to change the world right there to people. And that's the one thing that you want to change, the structure from lawful to legal. File that you own your covered wagon. The VIN number on it, your vehicle. File that you comprehend that your vehicle VIN number is a manufacturer state of origin, the birth record of that vehicle. Because once your child is birthed, they give you a birth certificate. Manufacturer state of origin says where it was manufactured. That's the same thing as a birth certificate. That's what the law technically says. It's the same thing. A vehicle was birthed. A boat was birthed. You know, when the shipment comes from another country, comes into port, they get taxed on the shipment. So that's where the excise tax and all taxes come from, products coming in the port. That's why they tax children and everything, because it's coming in the port. But when your children are 5 or more generations, it's not coming from port. It's already alive on this soil. It was brought here. It's a living man or woman child until it becomes an existence where it knows its rights. Oh, and the other point that I do want to bring up to the general public is that Oregon did, and I was talking to several people on this earlier, that the state of Oregon, when your child is 18 years old, they have the child register to vote because Kate Brown passed an administrative rule that says that when a child's 17, they get registered, but the state registers them to vote. When a child's 18, the state sends them a registered card that says they're already registered to vote, so they're obligated for the state taxes and debts in employees' union retirement fund. And people go, oh, I'm registered to vote. That's great. I'm in the system. I love it. No, you're saying that you're obligated to pay the debts by your property taxes, by your life, by your personal assets, and by your birth certificate bond if they could take you out and they close that birth certificate bond. That's why I say file and own your bond, own your birth certificate, own yourself. Once you own yourself, they can't do that because technically now they've sat there when they use your information, it's identity theft, federal crime. And that is a crime. That's not a statute, code, or administrative rule. And that's the one thing that the term person shall be construed to mean include an individual, a trust, a state, a partnership, association, a company, or a corporation. The term person. So the term person, so you clarify and comprehend this, means that you don't exist. You're an inanimate object. That's why people say, oh, you need to write stuff in a trust, an estate. Well, a trust and estate can be overturned by the basic court system. You want to write ownership, and then you're setting it up so that way you're setting it up to whoever it goes to, so it's non-taxable, non-liable. And by removal of publication code 515 reference, and this is interesting because they did this, to citizens not being liable for tax or confused as the key of the puzzle of unrevealing to the IRS rate deception. And that's 26 FR, CFR 1.1441. So when you read this, and that goes to 26 USC 861, the tax form, because when you file these tax structures on your property taxes, when they send you this stuff for your income tax, it's voluntary compliance. So once you start agreeing to voluntary compliance, you give authority over to them for your land, your assets. Judges and attorneys and these people will tell you, oh, no, that's not true. But you have to comprehend these men and women lie for a reason. The court system did that for a reason. And fraud upon the people under Title 18 USC 1001 by trickery, lies, and deception. And so I'm sending this out, and I'll post this back on the Facebook sites. But I want you folks, when you read this stuff, you'll get the structure of what you're reading to comprehend. So this way you know what you're doing to yourself if you comply to this stuff. And remember, your court systems today are run the same identical way Roman Catholic Church, Christianity churches were run back then with the Christian wars. You know, and then I got to ask another gentleman, because he put up a very interesting thing. I read part of his paperwork where he's going on the religious point of view, which I've got to clarify to make sure, because I've got to make sure he wants it on public record. And if he puts it on public record, we'll put it on public record of the new.org Tracker website. And it is interesting because there's more than one man or woman that is putting things up by religious points of view and putting it up on statute codes and administrative points of view and constitution points of view. So trying to put all these that works best for you is up to you to make your personal education decision. You can't make a choice. A choice gives a man or woman an excuse out of something in court. A decision means that you're liable for your responsibility and you comprehend the circumstances of what you're dealing with right now in life. And I'd much rather be responsible, because if I give my rights over to a court system, that means the judge can decide what, why, and how. And you don't want to do that to yourself, put a judge in that position of authority. People will go in and put themselves over to the judge. Some people it's worked with no problem. Other people have done that where they ended up in jail, because once you give authority to a judge to dictate your assets, your finances, he can sit there and put you in jail for it, and after 30 days, he can claim them. These guys know this stuff. And when the cops and attorneys and all these men and women tell you, oh, that's not true, they lie to you, because go read the attorney handbooks. Go read the structure that they do in their education seminars themselves. This stuff is not publicly known. They can't put it out to the public and blow their cover on how they're rape, robbing, and stealing. But through their corporation system, it is publicly known how they're doing it. So that's the one structure that you need to know how they're doing it, and coming up with these structures of what they're doing to our property, our children, our circumstances of life. Because if we don't sit there and put the structure together and protect the bloodline, the children, your future of your bloodline, and like I said, I'll repeat that again. I got people all the time that says, hey, there's no such thing as a bloodline. You had a child. Man and woman create blood. We know that's a reality. So because of that, that creates a bloodline. Because when you spill blood, it creates a line of blood or a puddle of blood or whatever you want to call it. It's like comprehending what the reality of life is compared to what people are assuming it is. And that is the point that you want to know what they're stating, you know. And then I'll get into that. Thank you for saying that. We'll get that tax cases up for Texas, so that way it explains that. We'll get that out so people can see that for themselves. Appreciate getting that, because, I mean, like I said, when you guys send me information, I do put it on our website. Actually, I don't. My producer does that, and I do thank him. Everybody, sometimes could thank him too, because he does a lot of work for all of us, putting this stuff up, keeping it together, so that way we're not running around in circles ourselves or our children or anybody else. And that's the main thing, that, we got people that send me information. I do share their information. There's a lot of things I do go out and rewrite, literally, because I know what they're quoting ain't accurate. So that's why when I rewrite it, I actually put the laws, the code, administrative rules in it. So then that way that they know it. And like I said, the one thing we do have, and I'm going to put this up, is knowing if you're dead or alive on your birth certificate bond. They're not going to tell you if you're dead or alive. Trust me, they're not going to do that. But that's where you have to prove to yourself and people around you if you're dead or alive. If you don't prove your circumstances of life or death, that's how they do that. Because after 30 days, if you don't claim your blood certificate oath of office, as the British could call it, that's your birth certificate. You don't know after 30 days when you're born to do that. Parents are not told this information. I do have a structure on that where you can file on your newborn child to claim your bloodline of the child. So that way it's not a conflict of interest. And see, you want to eliminate conflicts of interest. You want to claim your bloodline. You want to claim your assets. You claim your assets. That's indisputable evidence. Then they have to prove how they own your child. Could you imagine with these men and women or a state attorney general in a federal court building trying to explain how they own your child because you birthed that child in their system, so they're saying you don't own your child, that we own it because you birthed it? Yeah, I mean, these are things that people do not look at, but these are things that are so real that, common sense. I really was glad to hear the Bundys starting to speak out on Constitution and bloodline and structure. At least they're slowly apparently getting it because it's bloodline. And like I preach all the time, I would like to see where the Bible gives man and woman rights. The Constitution protects you from your elected and public servants. Where does the Bible protect you from your elected and public servants? The Bible teaches you religion to control you by religious control instead of teaching you to be free. The Constitution teaches you to be free, gives you rights, not privileges. That's the one thing. It's like, people lie to their children about Christmas. That is the other point that people get lied to about Christmas all the time. So it is knowing these circumstances so that way you are not out there being confused. The other point, too, is to realize that these men and women have BIN numbers for their corporations. You're allowed to presume them. You're allowed to educate yourself to collect them. I do have a structure out on Freedom of Information Act on this stuff that you could put out on your Freedom of Information Act. So you want to claim you. And I just put that up on my website dealing with the presumption of death, how they claim your birth certificate and they claim you being dead. And then the other point is you got to realize that the public employees, when you buy a land through a bank, they don't tell you this, but after 60 days, I think it is, they basically sell the contract and put a secret lien on your property. So what you want to do is every once in a while go to the tax assessor and ask them if there's any liens. I've got a template that I haven't finished it up, but I will post on the website, and I'll send back to this guy here right now. I'll send it to the other guy who sent me their emails, and I'll get this sent. That I will get this posted to you, so that way you've got the structure to you. And that is. And so, and I tell you right now, I do not take calls ever when I'm on a talk show, ever. So if you call me, you're wasting our life when I'm doing this. Because I will not do that at all, period. So, but I'm sending this to the gentleman on the liens on property taxes. And it is knowing that they do put a property tax lien on your property because you didn't file to claim that. So the elected and public servants put liens on the property so that way they're claiming it. And if you don't file against the lien that they file on your property, of course you don't know they do that. So then when your property taxes come up and you didn't pay them, this is one of the things they put a secret lien for property tax foreclosure. And this is how they get around putting, basically a lien on your property, like when you have a credit card and then they take it to court. Well, these court cases, you've never been in these court cases. You've never been to court on the structure. And so that is the point. You've never been here. You don't know what they're claiming. You don't know what they're saying. But then again, they're sitting there going, we put a lien on his property. And once you start comprehending the liens that they put on your property, the crap that these men and women do, and remember, they do it in the name of Christianity, their religion, their Bible, by the Vatican. Remember, you cannot have or be a part of any religion in the world unless it's been certified, registered, and clarified through the Vatican. That's a true statement. You file a 501c3 and you don't have authorization by the Vatican, you'll not get a 501c3. That is a real true statement. And that's where people have got to start looking, stepping out of the movie, watch the production. There is one movie I definitely recommend to everybody watch. I recommend this. It's called Interstate 60. I do recommend at least twice watching it. It does explain a lot of structure to you on how to do laws. It explains how the court system really works compared to the fantasy we believe or what we're taught in. And that's the one thing. We are taught fantasy about a lot of structure in these things. We are taught fantasy. We're taught Disney movie stuff, fantasy. And if you watch Disney movies, I always find it interesting with the subliminal messages they put in Disney movies. Does anybody else catch those? Where they put these stuff in the movies where you start catching on what they're actually saying in the movie? Those things, they do this stuff. It's subliminal. I've been in movies myself. I've been in lots of MTV videos in my past. And they do that. That's part of their structure. They truly do this structure. And then I got my computer freezing up and playing games on me again. Well, there we go. That tells me I'm doing stuff right again and sending out the right stuff. So when you do this stuff, you're comprehending what these secret liens are. And remember, they've even done this on boats and cars and stuff like this. It's not just one thing. You'll find out that if you go to apply for something and next thing you know you got a lien on something and you're like, wait a minute, I didn't know that. It's like when you go to a bank and get a credit card and they tell you can't get a credit card because you have bad credit because somebody filed a lien on your credit. And you're going, well, it's like me. I never had credit cards. I don't do credit cards. That way, I don't have a credit score. I don't sit there and go there because if I can't buy for it, pay for it, to me, I don't have an entitlement to it. So that way I solve the problem right off the bat, so that way I don't have a liability issue. I don't create my own liability. I want them to prove liability. So when you go to court, that's what I'm talking about, the injured party. When they're going for property taxes, registration, vehicles, and all this stuff, prove the injured party. And when they say the state is the injured party, that's a corporation. Then you ask who the state, and the judge will say, well, I'm representing the state. And you say, can you produce the affidavit, a statement that you are the injured party, and what damage did I cause you? What personal injury did I harm you? What property damage did I do to you? And let me see the affidavit that states that in writing. He's going to tell you, well, no, we don't have that. But you're supposed to do what I tell you, no? And that's what gets to me. People don't get that point. they will sit there and go on different responses on stuff and expect that to be done. So anyhow, been doing this for 2 hours. Didn't get a lot of conversation on from a couple of people. I do plan on putting a few things up on the site because I don't do religion. I just don't do religion.
All participants are muted. Q&A session is over.
I will not participate in that structure whatsoever of religion. The First Amendment says that I have the right to be free from religion, not to comply with religion. So if I want freedom, I don't sit there and go by religion. And that's where most people don't get that fact. And you got to be free from religion. You can't sit there and go off on anything else. But like I said, look and do your property taxes. Do a deal. Go to the tax assessor. Ask them what they got on the structure of property taxes. See if they have any liens filed on you. And if they have no liens, and you can prove there's no liens filed on you, then you want a sworn statement from the assessor stating that, and then you go file that with the county clerk. You file that with the Secretary of State. And then that way, once you file that, now you got proof that you're not liable for their structure to pay their property taxes, their insurance, and all that. And that's the one thing you want to do. You want to prove that you're not liable for their actions. And that's when it really comes down to it. You're proving you're not liable. And that's the one thing I do agree with, because I'm not liable for them. I won't be liable for them. And so that's the point. You don't want to be liable for them. So anyhow, I'm going to open up the floor one more time if anybody would like to speak up. And I'll give that a couple seconds. And if I don't hear anybody, I'm just going to go ahead and say, may the Great Spirit bless you. Mother Earth feed you, look over you. May the Great Spirit to take care of us.
Q&A session has started.
Okay. Let's just call it an evening, and then I'll take, I got people that have emailed me, and I'll take the calls afterwards. So go from there.
All right. We'd like to thank you for listening to Education by Ed. Bit of a side note. All instruments that Ed has written up or will write up in the future are not his liability if you use those instruments. You are liable for you using any instruments on the website. Also, Ed is not an attorney. He is not a lawyer. He's not a financial advisor, judge, or tax expert. This is all opinions and information that he has gleaned through the years. So, I mean, the disclaimer has been on the YouTube thing multiple times. So, basically, thank you for listening. Today is the December 10th, 2017. And catch us tomorrow when we'll have another riveting subject. Hopefully, this show has not been too taxing on you today.